Hi YouTube, Regina here. So today's video, I wanted to talk to you about how to set yourself up for a financially secure retirement. Yesterday I put out a video of the power of compound interest, and I think I gave credit to the wrong person. So it was actually Albert Einstein who said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. So I just wanted to clarify that. Also, I shared example from our retirement account, from one of our retirement accounts. And in retrospect, I don't think I feel completely comfortable with the idea of having our information or some of our information out there for the whole world to see. So I'll probably be turning that video private. I do want to be as responsive and answer as many questions as I can, but I also want to be true to ourselves. And also, there's the aspect of you just never know who could come across that information and use it in with malicious intent. Not that I know how they would use it, but anyway, there is that. So probably going to be turning it private. But it makes me think of the power of compound interest. When I used the example of the rule of 72, I used it in the way of what Albert Einstein says of those who understand it earn from it. But there is the aspect of those who do not, you know, pay it. And so I wanted to talk to you about the past, the present, and the future, because I do think that that's a vast difference. That's one of the big difference between my husband and I and a number of other Americans who are not saving for retirement. And so in this channel, I really want to inspire as many people as I can to save for retirement. But I do want people to understand that it really depends on your expense side of the equation of what you would need. So you don't necessarily need to save as much as we do, but the reality is your needs are going to be based on your expenses. But before we go into the expense portion aside, I wanted to talk to you about the past, the present, and the future. So this is the present, this is the past, and this is the future. And how my husband and I use our money is we spend our money on the present. And in the beginning, we were extremely frugal and we were spending some of our money on the past. And that was being compounded against me because I had student loan debt. I had some high interest credit card debt. And so, for instance, if my interest rate on my credit card debt were 24%, that means in 3 years, the amount of money that I would have paid on the debt would have doubled. But once the debt was paid off, and let's say that was done, I only paid out that certain amount to for my past. Once my past was done, I was done. So now this is how I'm spending my money. I'm spending it here and here. But most Americans are spending their money on the present and the past. And that means their money is compounding and earning interest for someone else. The credit card companies, the executives in these companies that are running the businesses. So whoever you're paying the compound interest to is who is really earning the money. And that money is not being used to grow your wealth. So he who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And so that's what's happening. So month in, month out, you're paying your money down here. And month in, month out, my money's being spent up here. And it's then compounding for me. And then it starts to compound exponentially. So that is how my wealth is growing, where this is how your wealth is being depleted if you're spending your money this way. Now, we're both still spending it. And over time, what ends up happening is because my wealth is growing so much, I could then increase my lifestyle. But you can only continue to spend what you're spending here because you have to service the debt. So I can make lifestyle improvements on my life and buy an additional property, do other things, go on better vacations. Most Americans are servicing debt, so their money is being compounded and paid against them. So I want that concept to be understood. So there's the past, the present, and the future. And most people are spending their money in the present, the past, and the present. And people who are growing their wealth are spending it in the present and the future. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about buying the next thing. Are you going to be servicing that debt and paying it in the present day? Are you going to be paying for your past? If you are, you can't afford it, pay down that debt and wait till you get to a point in life where you can pay for it with your present. Then that leads me to your expenses. So the expense side of the equation will determine how much you need to live. But it's not just the expense portion. You may have other income coming in that will support your lifestyle as well. So for instance, if you and I earn the same amount in all our years and we earn the medium income and we were going to get $2,000 a month from Social Security, then we could reduce the amount that we would need to live in retirement to secure a financial future for ourselves. So if you are living an extremely frugal life and you enjoy this life, and the life that you're living allows you to spend on your needs and some wants, then you're in a good position if you can keep your bills extremely low. Now, that said, if you're living an extremely frugal life because you were trying to pay down debts, but you're feeling that you're going without just so that you could pay down debts or secure your future, you're going to need to get to a point where you feel like you have enough. You want your spending to be in alignment with what is enough for you. But let's just say that $3,000 a month was enough. $36,000 a year to live. You live in an affordable home. You live in an affordable state. You have affordable groceries. You're able to go on vacation. You drive a modestly priced car, and you're able to live and do things on $3,000 a month. You would need $36,000 a year. But that $36,000 a year would be reduced by the $2,000 a month that you would be getting from Social Security. So instead of $3,000 a month, you would now only need one. So that $1,000 a month would mean you'd need $12,000 a year. So you take that 1,000 times 12. And even though you would need the 36,000 a year, because Social Security is giving you 24, you now only need 12. Then you would take that $12,000 a year and you would multiply it by 25. If you were doing the 4% withdrawal rate, which is generally said to last for like 30 years in 90 something percent of cases, and you would live on that, you multiply it by 25, and you would only need $300,000 in retirement assets to secure a reasonably secure retirement. Now, that said, in this retirement number, you're not planning for things like high care health costs. You're planning for the budget of $3,000 a month. So one of the things that you could do is plan for a smaller withdrawal rate so that you continue to have your money growing for you. And so in that event, instead of having your money be multiplied by 25, you can multiply it by 30. And so that would probably give you a higher safety margin. So the $12,000 a year, instead of having 300,000, you'd want to make sure that you're saving 360,000 so that you have a bit of a buffer in there in the event that something happened that you could cover points in time where your expenses would need to go up. So that would be, the lower withdrawal rate of a 3% would allow you would have that additional 1% to bridge the distance as well. So there is that. Now, someone who needs the $10,000 a month and they're getting $2,000 from Social Security, they would need $8,000 remaining after the $2,000 for Social Security. So that $8,000 a year a month would be $96,000 a year. That $96,000 a year multiplied by 25 would be $240,000. And then $96,000 a year multiplied by 30 would be 288,000. So the higher and more safer number, instead of the 2,400,000 that they would need to save, would be 2,880,000, just to have a higher safety margin. The other thing that people do as well is some people do not rely on Social Security at all. So they'll take their $3,000 a month expenses, and they would multiply that by 25, and that would bring them $750,000 to save. So the safety margin is that if you're not relying on Social Security for your income needs whatsoever, and that you're using that to potentially offset the higher cost of healthcare in your future, then anywhere between 300,000 to 750,000 would be a real safe number, so that you could then use that Social Security to be a surplus that would be growing for you in the event that you ever had high cost medical needs in retirement. Particularly if you don't have long-term care insurance for yourself and you're at an age where you can't get long-term care insurance because it gets too costly. The other thing to know about long-term care insurance is it only covers healthcare cost in the event of an emergency where you can't do two things for yourself. So if in the event you had a stroke and you couldn't dress yourself or feed yourself, that would count as two things you couldn't do, but it only covers for 3 years of high care cost. So that is one of the reasons why some people do not rely on Social Security for their retirement needs, and they are bridging the distance. So that's what you've seen in some of my numbers. I'm not counting on Social Security to be used for my everyday living expenses. And so when I shared the video on my numbers, it's because Social Security is to be used potentially if I needed it for long-term health care needs. And so that's the point of Social Security for me. In my opinion, Social Security was never supposed to be used as a retirement fund for people to live solely on. I think it was only supposed to cover some close to 40% of needs at the most, roughly 40% of retirement needs or healthcare cost when you, as an older adult. And that to me is healthcare costs. So that's one of the things as far as my point of view on what someone would need for retirement. So if you're really living a very frugal life and you have $300,000 saved and you're thinking, wow, I can retire, you're probably very close to being able to retire with 300,000 saved. If you're getting $2,000 a month in Social Security, you can retire, but you still have a potential safety margin that you should build in the event that you have higher healthcare costs in your future. So these are some of the things to consider, but and it's one of the reasons why we are trying to grow our wealth. But there's also other aspects of personal finance, and that is the concept of time. If you are older and you're still working into your 60s, therefore, you're probably not going to need as much money because you have less runway in front of you than you do behind you. Sadly, we don't have infinite amount of time. So you'll end up not needing as much money, as you won't need to go up to the full 750,000, even if you're spending 300,000, $3,000 a month, because of the fact that there's less years to cover. So that rule of 4% or even the 3% rule is based on a 30-year longevity. And while the number of people living over the age of 90 is growing exponentially, it's still a very small percentage of people that actually do. So I know it's a lot of information out there that I put, but the older you are, the less you would need to save for retirement, because some of your retirement needs would be met for the fact that if you had $300,000 saved, you could easily live on that money, could continue to be growing, and you'd still have money to cover unexpected cost and still potentially not run out of money, because it's 30-year rule, right? So it's lasting for 30 years. So if you're in your 60s and you have $300,000 saved and your expenses are $3,000 a month and you have Social Security of a $2,000 payment, you're in a pretty good place. So some things to consider. I hope that's very helpful. And if you're in the situation where you're paying for your past and you're living in your past and your present, then try to get out of that situation as best as you can and start moving to save money and start growing your wealth into so that you can retire. And I plan to retire sooner than later because time, for all of us runs out. And so for me, I know I have to plan for a longer retirement. So it's more than 30 years that I'd be planning for with regards to our retirement. If I am retiring at 55, 56, then or 56, then it would be reality is that I will need a bit more money because it's more than 30 years if I live into my 90s, as opposed to that same person who's in their 60s living into their 90s. I hope that makes sense. Hit me up with any questions. And thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.